very wealthy American and Western capitalists and the ghoulish dictators that control China. And with the one-way free trade that we've established, to which we have acquiesced, and the short-term profit desired by America's corporate elite, our country has been a partner. Considering those factors, our country has been a partner in building the Chinese economy into a monstrous threat, while at the same time weakening and destroying our own manufacturing base. Millions of our people are being put out of work. We're going through a huge financial crisis. One of the major elements that have brought us to this financial crisis has been a one-way free trade policy with communist China. The fact that they now have $1 trillion worth of our wealth and our manufacturing base has been destroyed should be of no surprise. It was predictable. And those of us who fought most favored nation status and said we've got to have some political reform, liberalization before we give such enormous economic power to a government, we were just bypassed and treated as if we didn't matter, because the business elite of our country wanted to have those massive short-term profits. Then they could give themselves bonuses and they could retire here, leaving the stockholders and leaving their own employees far worse off and in a horrible situation. And now the whole country is in a horrible situation. Over the last 2 decades, we have built China from a relatively backwards economy into a Frankenstein monster. And when I say we, I mean the policies of the United States government have lifted the economic capabilities of a country that has had no political liberalization, no political reform of their dictatorial system, and a country, yes, that is also engaged in rebuilding its military. And now this Frankenstein monster is slowly turning on its creator. Turning on us. Turning on us. Well, there is a China-related issue that is emerging. Not all the bad decisions were made in the past. We're about to make another bad decision by reversing one of the good decisions that we made that has really saved us from an incredible potential harm. The issue that is surfacing in Washington is both symbolic and a very real threat to America's security and our economic viability. And what is the issue? It is whether or not America should loosen its controls on the exports of our technology. The issue which will be determined shortly deals specifically with U.S. space technology, satellites, and Chinese rocketry. About 15 years ago, the Clinton administration, American satellite manufacturers were, under that administration, American satellite manufacturers were permitted to launch their satellites on Chinese rockets. It was a position that they hadn't been permitted before. At the time, I talked to our aerospace industry and thought it might be a good idea. This, of course, after being assured by the Clinton administration there would be no possibility of a technology transfer. Controls and security walls, I was promised, would prevent the Chinese from obtaining any space technology that had been paid for by the American taxpayers. And of course, American taxpayers had paid billions of dollars to develop space technology, like gyroscopes on a chip and all kinds of things that permitted rockets to be successful. Well, I have to admit, I accepted the Clinton administration's word. I swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. But within a very short period of time after that policy, after it was opened up, I recognized the horrendous results of permitting that business relationship with Chinese rocket companies, and which I might add, those Chinese rocket companies then and are now owned by the People's Liberation Army. The Long March Rocket Company is a People's Liberation Army company. In short, American aerospace companies ended up perfecting Chinese rockets in order to send up our satellites at a cheaper rate. By the way, what's the difference between a missile and a rocket? The difference between a missile and a rocket is the color of the paint on the outside of the projectile. So if it's in camouflage, it must be a missile, and if it's white or a different color, it must be a peaceful rocket. In the end, after we were launching our satellites at that cheaper rate, in the end, the viability of our own missile and rocket industry was undermined. Our own aerospace base, the base of our economy, our aerospace jobs and expertise were put in jeopardy. And at the same time, we improved the Chinese rockets and missiles. We improved their ability to launch military as well as civilian payloads. Our transfer of technology and know-how thus enabled the People's Liberation Army rockets to carry more than one nuclear warhead. They couldn't do that before. Our technology, our people went over there, and now they have the technology of having 3 warheads instead of 1 warhead, which means obliterating all of Southern California instead of one part of Southern California. We provided them the ability to MIRV. That's what it's called. It was insane then, but now the issue is coming back, and without even blushing, the China lobby, the big business community that's been making all kinds of money off the China trade, even as it's hurt our own economy, are pushing for us to open up the China rocket industry again. To make this clear, I am part of the team that is trying to move forward legislation to permit our high-tech industries to export to and to cooperate with friendly democratic countries. I believe in that. Free trade between free people. But I have personally insisted on legislation that is opening up that free trade with free countries, and we have worked with other members of Congress to ensure that this trade tech legislation will not loosen the restrictions on using Chinese rockets to launch American satellites. We know that launching American satellites on Chinese rockets will result in technology transfer and the upgrading of those Chinese rockets. It happened before, it will happen again. If we open up to the use of Chinese rockets, it helps them and it hurts us. What will it do to our aerospace industry? Like Boeing and Northrop Grumman, who are already hard-pressed in the production of their own rockets and missiles. How about Sea Launch, a Boeing partnership with Ukraine, which launches things into space from a floating platform, which is based in Southern California? Well, it recently declared bankruptcy, but if we allow the Chinese to undercut everybody's price, it will be permanently out of business. It will be permanently out of business, of course, if the People's Liberation Army is permitted to sell rocket launches on the cheap until all of our companies go bankrupt. SpaceX and other entrepreneurial space transportation companies that have invested hundreds of millions of dollars of private capital in creating a private U.S. launch industry will be mortally wounded if we permit the Chinese to come in with their subsidized system and their controlled economy and undercut the price until our guys go out of business, and then, of course, they'll be in complete control of what gets into space. The whole debate on this issue and the maneuvering on Capitol Hill reflects an insidious manipulation of our system by a foreign power, and yes, the total absence of any type of moral consideration or patriotic consideration on the part of America's financial and corporate elite. They've had one-way free trade and a multitude of economic building concessions, and it has been American policy to give it to them. Over the years, we've been told over and over again to justify such a power that we were giving this monstrous regime. And we were saying, if we just get involved with them, let's get more involved with these people. Let's uplift the economy of the Chinese people, and their government will come around by making their country more profitable and making sure their country is more prosperous. We will actually bring forces about that will liberalize that country. That's what we were told all this time. And has that happened? There has been no liberalization in China. I call this theory that has been foisted upon us by America's economic elite, which were making profit from that thuggery and that dictatorship and the control of the Chinese people. Yes, those people gave us that ideal that if we just keep going, keep making China more prosperous, they will come around and become more peaceful. I call that the hug a Nazi, make a liberal theory. And obviously it has not worked. So why have we had this bad policy? I would draw